Okay, perhaps the most dreaded topic in a high school biology class is the reproductive anatomy of humans. I remember being in high school and my teacher made this like really kind of awkward, and therefore the students felt awkward. So I'm going to make this as least awkward as possible. When I look back on it, I don't really know why the students all felt so awkward. Again, maybe it was just because of the teacher, or maybe it's because I'm more mature now and have gone through college classes and stuff on this. But you guys are all mature enough to handle this. So we're going to go ahead and go through the reproductive anatomy. We're going to take the next 3 days to do this. So I'm going to go through the entire chapter 34 now in this video, and then tomorrow you guys will have a video on the menstrual cycle, and then on Wednesday there's a quiz on the reproductive system, and then Thursday and Friday are actually free days, so there's not any specific work in this class. One, because I will actually not be here. I have a small intimate elopement that I am doing in North Carolina, so I will actually be driving out for that with just the bride and the groom and the pastor, and then obviously my husband and I to take the photos. Since this whole coronavirus thing threw those plans in for a loop, I still will not be here though on Thursday or Friday, and I didn't want to make the sub have to do this, so that's why we're going to do this in the next 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then Thursday and Friday you'll just have to answer the attendance question, and then the rest of that hour for Thursday and Friday, you will have to either catch up on other work or just have a free hour if you have already caught up on your work. Okay, so let's get started. Let me make this bigger first. All right, the key concept for this section is female and male reproductive organs fully develop during puberty. The female reproductive system produces what is called ova. There are two main functions of the female reproductive system. So the first function is to produce ova, or egg cells, those are the eggs, and also to provide a place where a zygote develops. All right, so this is a side view here. So you have everything labeled, so I'm just going to go through these all real quick. So you have something called the fallopian tube, which is right here, and we'll see this better once we look at like a front diagram view, but this is a side view, but I'll still go through it. Okay, so this is the fallopian tube, this is the ovary, this is the bone, the pubic bone, this is the bladder. And oh, quick side note, so the bladder is right next to the uterus, and so if the mother is pregnant, obviously the baby is in the uterus, and the reason why pregnant women have to pee all the time, as you can see, is because the uterus is right next to the bladder. So if there's a baby in there, it's pushing up on the bladder. So if you ever wondered why pregnant women have to pee all the time, that's the reason why, because the uterus is literally, or the baby is actually pushing on the bladder. And then there's the urethra there. This is the vagina. This is the rectum. You have the cervix here, and then this is the uterus. So I'll kind of go through what's attached though, because these are kind of labeled in a weird order. But you have the uterus here, which is attached to the fallopian tube, and then the ovary here. There's actually a little space in between the ovary and the fallopian tube. And then this is the vagina right here, and that's like the tube part. A lot of times people are confused and refer to the vulva as the vagina, but that's not true. The vagina is literally just the tube on the interior. And then just like males, women obviously have a urethra as well. Oops. All right, estrogen has three main functions. So estrogen is one of the hormones that females produce. Develop female sexual characteristics, develop eggs, and prepare uterus for pregnancy. So I think I mentioned this before, but soy milk actually has, or soybeans have a pretty high level of the hormone estrogen. So while for females it's not a big deal if you drink a lot of soy milk, I was going to say I do, but I actually drink almond milk, not soy milk so much. But if you need like a milk alternative because you are lactose intolerant, a lot of protein bars actually use soy protein in it. If you are a dude and you drink a lot of soy milk or eat a lot of protein bars with soy protein in it instead of like maybe whey protein or pea protein, Um, you will actually start to develop female characteristics as well. So, boys, just beware of soy milk and soy products. It's fine to have a little bit every now and then, even a little bit of soy milk, whatever, once in a while, or in coffee or whatever if you're lactose intolerant as a milk alternative. But just be careful how much you are consuming because there is estrogen in it. Okay, estrogen has three main functions: develop female sexual develop female sexual characteristics, develop eggs, and prepare the uterus for pregnancy. Okay, the male reproductive system produces sperm. So again, this is a side view, and I'll go through this in just a second here. So let me make just another quick side note. You might be sitting here. I wish we could have done this in class. Because this is just so, like, the science behind all of this is so fascinating that this all just works. But we obviously are not in class, so this video is going to have to suffice. But I wasn't about to make you read through these slides on your own because I wanted to explain a lot of things because there's a lot of really just amazing science behind the male and female reproductive systems. But again, this is a side view here. I'll go through it in just a second. There are two main functions of the male reproductive system: to produce sperm cells and deliver sperm to the female reproductive system. So the male genitalia is very external. The female genitalia is very internal. Okay, so I'm going to go through these in just kind of a counterclockwise motion, just like I did with the female reproductive system, and then I'll go through some things and show you what's connected and whatnot. Okay, so here's the bladder. These are the vas deferens. So you can see the whole vas deferens here. And then obviously there's vas deferens that connect to each testes, or each testicle. So I'll go through that once I show you the connections here. And we'll especially see it when we see a front view of the male reproductive system anatomy. All right, so males also have a pubic bone there. The prostate gland is right there. This obviously is the penis. Urethra, you can see that too right there. That's the urethra. And if you didn't notice, the male urethra is way longer than the female urethra, which is another kind of reason why girls tend, some girls, not all girls, but if you are like super ticklish as a girl and maybe you've accidentally peed your pants because you were so ticklish, well, the reason why is because girls have such a short urethra versus males. But there's also risk for more problems with the urethra if you're a male because it is much longer. Okay, here's the testes. Sorry, this box keeps popping up. Let's try to stop moving my mouse. The testes, the scrotum, which is like the sac outside of it. This is called, I believe, the cremaster muscle, and it's the only muscle. So women don't have any muscle like this, where it's actually shaped like, I don't know how to even describe it, like a bag, I guess. And that's the only muscle in the body that is shaped like that. And then you have the epididymis here. Sorry guys, I have allergies, so if you hear me sniffling in the background, that's what that is. This is the epididymis. This is called the bulbourethral gland, right there. And then this is the rectum, and then this is the seminal vesicle. Testosterone has two main functions. So testosterone is the hormone that males produce. Females also produce testosterone, just not nearly in as much, not nearly as much. So testosterone is produced in the testes. That's kind of where they're very similarly named. But testosterone is also produced in the pituitary gland, and women obviously have a pituitary gland as well, so women produce testosterone as well, just not nearly in the levels that males do, because males are the ones that have the testes. But the testosterone is responsible for developing male sexual characteristics and producing sperm. Also, quick side note on the levels of testosterone in females. So females that work out like a lot, I'm talking like a lot. Like I usually work out around like every day or every other day if I'm having a lazy week. But like if you work out every day or if you're hardcore into sports, whatever, as a female, that's fine. You're not going to start developing male sexual characteristics. However, if you've seen like those really hardcore triathletes or like people that run the triathlons or hardcore women who are marathon runners, they produce more testosterone on average than like the regular average female. So they might actually look a little bit less feminine and a little bit more manly. It doesn't mean that they are a man or turning into a man, not at all. It just means they're producing more testosterone, which is giving them more male characteristics, which is kind of interesting. All right, 34.2. Maybe this is just because I absolutely love science, but I think this is also fascinating. Okay, human reproductive processes depend on cycles of hormones. So eggs mature and are released according to hormonal cycles. There's something called follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, or LH, which regulate egg production. So if you didn't know this already, girls are born like from the time that they're literal babies and are born or in their mother's womb. They have all the egg cells in their bodies that they will ever produce in their lifetime. So for instance, a female's body isn't going to produce more eggs. She already has all the eggs that she will ever have in her lifetime. But there's one egg cell that is released about every 28 days, and we'll go into a little bit more of that in detail here, but 28 days is kind of like the normal average. Meiosis, we talked about that in like December or something, I can't remember when, but we talked about meiosis. Meiosis produces eggs and polar bodies. So what polar bodies are is, for meiosis, we talked about how you will get 4 different cells, right? It's going to split into 4 different cells. So I think, hopefully you remember all this. I'm pretty sure we talked about it when we talked about meiosis, but it's different than mitosis where you get identical cells, right? In meiosis, you get 4 different cells because the DNA is all different combinations of the mother's DNA. So the same thing happens with sperm as well. Sperm splits into 4 different cells as well, each sperm cell, to produce each little sperm. So I'm trying to like backtrack as I'm going on here. So hopefully you remember all this. I'm kind of recapping it a little bit. But polar bodies are the ones that aren't going to be the actual egg. So like the egg cell will develop or split into 4 different egg cells. The biggest one, that's the real egg cell. The other 3 are just called polar bodies. So let's go ahead and look at this chart here. Let me read through these last 2 first. Each egg has 23 chromosomes. Meiosis is completed at fertilization. So obviously you can't survive, you're not a person with half the amount of DNA, so you're not a baby when it's just the mother's egg, right? You need something to fertilize it, and that something is the male sperm cells. So when one of the sperm penetrates the egg, then that's when your textbook does not go into all this. I didn't learn this until college, but I'm going to insert it in here because it's just like super crazy cool. The reason why multiple sperm don't fertilize one egg is because as soon as one sperm fertilizes the egg actually puts up this like hard outer defense shell, so that way no other sperm can get in. It's just that one sperm and that's it. So whatever combination of DNA that sperm cell had and whatever combination of DNA that main egg cell had, that's what gives you your hair color, eye color, certain features, and different things like that, which is like so crazy cool because there's millions of sperm. And then there's just that one egg, and depending on which egg is released for that month, has different DNA than the other eggs that the mother is carrying. So it's just crazy because you look like the way you look like, or you look the way you look because of that just like crazy happenstance of that one sperm meeting that one egg, and bam, that's you. Pretty crazy. All right, so let's look at this diagram. So this is a potential egg. Meiosis 1 is complete, and that's when they're just going to split. So we've got one chromosome over here, one chromosome over here. Remember, these are sister chromatids. Remember, it's very confusing because this is called a chromosome, but this is also called a chromosome. So anyway, if you remember back to meiosis, I explained why that was so confusing. But anyway, so you've got a split here. The purple one went there, the reddish pink one went there. And then in meiosis 2, so meiosis has 2 stages. Meiosis 2, each of those sister chromatids separate. So what are the polar bodies? Well, this is the actual egg. You can see it's much bigger than these ones, right? This one will actually split as well, so you'll get one here, and that's why there's 1, 2, 3, 4. But it doesn't show that, which is a little bit confusing. That's why I'm explaining it, because if I were to draw it, I would have drawn this into the little split here too. But they didn't ask me to draw the diagram of the textbook. Maybe they will someday, because I feel like I could draw a pretty good biology textbook. Just kidding. But anyway, so these guys would have been really small, really small. This one's small. This is the ovum or the egg. This is the actual one that will be fertilized. The other ones will just die. Seems kind of like a waste, doesn't it? But they don't really know why the other 4 or other 3 just die and the 4th one is the only one that's left. But the bigger one is the one that's going to survive, because obviously it's the biggest, has the most nutrients to then support the fertilization process if it is to be fertilized by sperm. Okay, let's talk about FSH, LH, and estrogen stimulate the release of eggs. This is called the follicle right here. So the follicle ruptures at ovulation. The egg travels into the fallopian tube. This is the fallopian tube. This is more of like a head-on view. You're not seeing the other side, but just picture it as mirror imaged on this side. The ruptured follicle becomes the corpus luteum, is what it's called. So let's just look here quick. So I told you there's a little space in between the fallopian tube and the ovary. The ovary is attached to the uterine wall just so like it doesn't go anywhere, but there is a space in between here. So let me let that box go out of the way real quick. Okay, the corpus luteum you can see is right there. And then this little follicle will actually be what is released. So this little egg in the follicle is released. And then that goes into, it travels in that little space, kind of a scary moment for that little egg to go into the space of the unknown, into the fallopian tube. And this is where it's pretty much safe. However, there are problems with people who are trying to get pregnant, where if that egg cell actually gets implanted instead of implanting in the uterus where it's supposed to, it can actually implant in the fallopian tube, and that often is called an ectopic pregnancy, where they actually have to go in and do surgery, because if the baby starts developing in the fallopian tube, the mother has major problems, the baby has major problems, and the mom can actually die from that, and usually you need a surgery. It's usually called an ectopic surgery or ectopic pregnancy, and causes all kinds of problems and pain, and usually ends in death of the mother or baby or both, if it's not taken care of, like operated on. Okay, I'm just gathering my thoughts here. Okay, so the egg cell is traveling through the fallopian tube, and then it goes into the uterus, where then it'll implant on the uterine wall if it is fertilized by sperm. If not, then that's why girls have their monthly period. And they say monthly, however, that's not always accurate, because generally it's 28 days, however it can range from like 22 to 35 days, which is still considered normal, but some people, they skip months, or like maybe skip a couple of months. So skip a month, skip a couple of months, and that is usually something you'll want to talk to your doctor about. It's not necessarily like super dangerous or anything like that. It's just not quite the normal cycle. But and people get their period like starting at different times. So sometimes middle school age, sometimes high school age, sometimes not until later in high school. But I'd say if like you're getting to your senior year and you still aren't on your period yet, then you should probably talk to a doctor. But it's just different for everyone. But as you guys are younger, especially like high school age, if it's like every 2 weeks or every month or whatever, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but obviously still talk to your doctor about it just to make sure everything is okay. Okay, eggs mature and are released according to hormonal cycles. So this, it's called the menstrual cycle. We will talk more in detail about this tomorrow, because I feel like there's so many misconceptions about this and people just really don't understand it, and it's important for boys and girls to understand it. The menstrual cycle has 3 phases. It has a flow phase, where the endometrium sheds. The endometrium is like that lining in the uterus that actually builds up over the course of that month, because it's preparing for possibly supporting a baby. However, if that egg is not fertilized by sperm cell, then it releases that endometrium. The follicular phase, ovulation occurs. Luteal phase, corpus luteum forms. So this is just a diagram kind of showing you the varying levels of hormones as this process is going on. So you can see there's spikes of estrogen, progesterone, which is the other type of hormone that the ovaries produce. So the ovaries produce progesterone and estrogen. Testicles produce testosterone. Those are like the two main ones for females and the one main one for males. Let me see if there's anything else I want to point out on this diagram. Not really, because you guys will see the video tomorrow in more detail about this. The menstrual cycle stops at menopause, so until you're about 40 or 50 as a woman, you will have your period pretty regularly, about every 28 days. However, when you reach menopause, then it just stops. So there's a decline in hormone levels, which makes cycles irregular. Eventually, the cycle stops altogether. All right, so now we're going to talk about sperm production. So sperm production in the testes is controlled by hormones. Testosterone, FSH, and LH stimulate sperm production. So males also have FSH and LH. One sex cell divides into 4 sperm. So this one is actually showing you the division of all 4 because all 4 of these are viable. It's not just one like the female, with the one egg being viable. All 4 of these are viable. So any one of these plus all the many other sperm cells could be the one to fertilize that one egg. It's kind of like a race to the finish line, so to speak. Each sperm has 23 chromosomes, so remember, you can't be a human with just half the amount of chromosomes, so you're not a baby if you're just sperm, you're not a baby if you're just egg. It has to be the two together to create a human, because you have to have 46 chromosomes in total. Alright, so let's just look at this. This is just like the other one with the egg, but you have each chromosome splitting. The green one goes here, blue one goes here. They're not actually green and blue, but they're just distinguishing them. And then each sister chromatid will split and separate into their own sperm cells, and then this one will separate as well. And each of them has a different combination of DNA, which is pretty crazy. We even talked about crossover when we talked about meiosis. So these arms could have crossed over at some point, so this little tip could have gotten swapped with this little tip, so that would even create more genetic diversity and random chance with DNA, which is pretty cool. All right, sperm cells fully mature in the epididymis. So the head contains acrosome. This is the head of the sperm. This is a really long flagella. So we talked about flagella, which is like a tail. So the sperm's tail is actually a flagella, which helps it swim. The midpiece contains ATP. And remember our friend adenosine triphosphate. When in doubt, always guess ATP. See, I told you it'd be back. The tail allows mobility, so that, again, that's how it swims. And interestingly enough, I'm adding a lot of random pieces of information in here, but I feel like the textbook doesn't do a great job with putting little pieces of important information in that I still think you should know. And I feel like people just have general questions about this, but they're always too scared to ask, so I'll just address them. But sperm's pH is actually more on the neutral to basic side of things on the scale, the pH scale, and the vagina is actually a very acidic, not very acidic, but more acidic side of the scale. So it's actually a really hostile environment to sperm. So sperm first have to go through a really hostile, obviously they go through a pretty hostile environment just to fertilize the egg because it's such a high or low pH compared to what they're used to. So if by chance the sperm do survive, or many of the sperm do survive, which they do, but a lot of them do die in that acidic environment, it's almost like it's just crazy. It's crazy that you were even born, you know what I mean? Because there's so many different factors have to go into it. Like, what if there was a mess up in the DNA? Which that does happen, and that's why we have certain things like Down syndrome. Or what if sometimes there's a mess up in DNA where it'll actually result in death of the baby before it even is ever born. But it's just there's so many little pieces to the puzzle that have to come together like so perfectly. And to think that babies are being born like every couple of seconds, that's incredible. Like the chances of that are just like astronomical, just really crazy. Also, the head is what contains the chromosomes. Fertilization occurs when a sperm cell joins an egg cell. Sperm penetrates an egg, the membrane keeps out other sperm. That's why I said the egg will form like this hard protective outer layer as soon as that one sperm enters. That way, no other sperm can enter in, because that would be a problem if you had more DNA than you're supposed to. It wouldn't even be a viable baby at that point because there's too much DNA. Nucleus of sperm joins with the egg. The zygote is then formed, and that's what begins the process of that little tiny baby's life. And that's a real like cell picture here. So this whole thing is the egg, and this is the sperm. You can see how much bigger that egg cell is than the sperm cell. Multiple zygotes can result from fertilization, so that's why we have things like twins. Identical twins come from the same egg, so if the egg is fertilized by a sperm, so we've got this scenario here, and we've got, which is how you were all made, right? If you're a twin, that egg and sperm combination actually split. So then you've got two identical twins. Fraternal twins, however, and let me backtrack real quick, identical twins have to be the same gender because it's the exact same DNA. So, for instance, if you're an identical twin, you have an identical twin sister if you're a girl, an identical twin brother if you're a boy. Identical twins always have to be the same gender. Fraternal twins can be a brother and sister, or sister and sister. The reason for that is because there was actually two eggs released from the mother, and therefore there was two eggs to be fertilized by two different sperm. So that's why you can have fraternal twins be a boy and a girl. They don't always have to be a boy and a girl. It depends on which sperm fertilizes the eggs, but you can have a boy and a girl that are twins, and those are fraternal twins. Identical twins have to be the same gender. Infertility makes reproduction difficult or impossible. So some people have different problems for whatever reason. It may not even be because of anything they did. Maybe they're super healthy, they ate super healthy, they work out all the time. So like they've done everything they possibly could to be healthy, and they are, but just for some reason they are infertile or they have a really hard time getting pregnant. I know this lady who they have two little girls right now, but in between, like their first pregnancy, totally fine, but then they try to get pregnant after their firstborn, and they miscarried. And there's actually twins that they miscarried, and then they tried to get pregnant again, and they miscarried a second time, but it was the third baby that was miscarried because the first miscarriage was twins. So they don't really know why it happens, and she's like super healthy, super like fit person, eats really, really healthy, so they don't really know why it happens to some people. Oops. Sexually transmitted diseases. We have talked about this a little bit when we did viruses and bacteria and those projects, but STDs can affect fertility and overall health. So STDs are passed from one person to another during sexual contact. Bacterial STDs include chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea. Viral STDs include hepatitis B, genital herpes, human papillomavirus, and HIV. Bacterial STDs can be treated and in many cases cured with antibiotics. You guys all know how I feel about antibiotics though, because they really messed me up when I got my wisdom teeth out. But anyway, I won't go on about that again. Viral STDs can be treated, but there's no cure for these diseases. STDs track reproductive organs, and remember, antibiotics really only work on bacteria. We learned about that over and over and over again. STDs attack reproductive organs. They can cause infertility. If you leave them untreated, some can be deadly. STDs can be avoided by abstinence, so don't go sleeping around, or by using a condom. This is a parasite that causes trichomoniasis. Trichomoniasis. I remember learning about this in college. There's something I wanted to add about this, but I don't remember what it was now, which can affect fertility. And that's a nasty looking little thing. Okay, next one, 34.3. The key concept here is development progresses in stages from zygote to fetus. So now we're going to learn about the baby's development. So the fertilized egg implants into the uterus or the uterine wall and is nourished by the placenta and umbilical cord. So the placenta is basically when the baby implants in the uterine wall. Remember, this is like the lining, the endometrium that will be sloughed off is the scientific term during your period if you don't have a fertilized egg. Sorry, my mind's running in a bunch of different directions. I've been trying to hone it in. But if you do have a fertilized egg, then that will implant in the uterine wall, and then this will just continue to get bigger, and this is then what is known as the placenta. And that is usually released after the baby is born within a couple of minutes, and that's called afterbirth. It sounds kind of gross, but it's totally natural, so yeah. The zygote becomes a blastocyst and implants in the uterus. That's kind of a fun word, a blastocyst. The ectoderm develops into skin and the nervous system. Mesoderm develops into internal tissues and organs. Endoderm develops into digestive organs and their lining. Remember we talked about ecto is like the outer layer, meso is the middle layer, endo is the inner, or meso is the middle layer, endo is the middle layer. Outer, middle, inner. The blastocyst becomes an embryo. Embryonic membranes protect and nourish the embryo. Amniotic sac cushions the embryo. So here's the amniotic sac. You can see it's like this liquidy cushion for the baby. The placenta connects the mother and the embryo. So this is the placenta, kind of thing surrounding here, right there. And this is the umbilical cord, which is attached to where your belly button is, and that's why you have a belly button, because the umbilical cord is snipped off when you're born. Depending on where it is snipped, we'll give you an innie or an outie belly button. If you ever wondered why some people have an innie, some people have an outie, kind of just depends on where you snip the umbilical cord. I've seen some kids, I know some kids that have a really big outie, and oftentimes hospitals will let the dad snip the umbilical cord of the newborn baby, and if the dad doesn't do a good job, he basically determines whether or not that baby has a severe outie or not, which is just kind of funny. So if you have a severe outie, you can blame your dad if he's the one who cut it. Just kidding. All right. So the umbilical cord is just connecting the embryo to the placenta. That's how the baby gets its nutrients, also how it releases waste, and the babies in the womb don't have waste like they do when they're born, so they don't have like normal poop. It's just like different minerals and things that didn't get used up that just go back and are dissolved by the mother's system. So it's not poop. If that was the case, that'd be a major problem, and the mom would probably go septic and die. But it's very different when the baby is in the womb. A zygote develops into a fully formed fetus in about 38 weeks. Human pregnancies are divided into trimesters. So if you didn't know that, there's basically 3 trimesters. So you have the first trimester, your body plan and early development is what's going on. So during the first trimester, the little tiny baby is just starting to form. So here's it broken down. This is happening in the first week, or the first couple of weeks, so week 1 through 12. Heart, brain, intestines, pancreas, kidney, liver, all these organs are forming, which is crazy because it's such a little teeny tiny thing, little teeny baby. Heartbeat can be detected after just 5 weeks. That's pretty incredible. Some people don't even know they're pregnant yet at 5 weeks, and yet they have a little tiny baby inside of them with a heartbeat. Like, that's insane. A lot of people don't find out they're pregnant until like after 8 weeks or so. So 2 months in. And usually women don't start showing, depends on how small they are and how much body fat and all that they have. But some women don't even know they're pregnant or can't tell, like, what am I trying to say? They're not showing yet, I guess is the way you say it. So you wouldn't even be able to tell someone's pregnant the first couple of months, perhaps. Arms and legs begin to develop. Lenses of the eye appear. Eyelids will later fuse shut to allow irises to develop. The individual fingers and toes begin to form, and you can kind of see the little fingers there. Super cute. Hair, fingernails, and toenails develop. Cerebral hemispheres begin to form. So that's like the brain. Early structure of bronchi begin to develop, so the lung structures. External sex organs show the sex of the fetus, so when families find out what they're having, what the gender of the baby is, they can usually find that out pretty early. Oops. Second trimester, the fetus is definitely more active and more developed. So this is around weeks 13 to 27. So you have joints and bones forming, skin protected by fine hair and waxy substance. First movement, so the mom can start to feel the baby kicking. Wake and sleep cycles are more regular. Brain begins a stage of rapid growth. Eyes are open and they blink. Eyebrows, eyelashes have formed. Fetus breathes in amniotic fluid, which actually strengthens the lungs. And the fetus swallows amniotic fluid and can actually make urine, which when it releases the urine through the umbilical cord, actually, wait a minute, let me think about that. The urine actually is just absorbed by the mother as well. So babies don't poop, that just goes through the umbilical cord. Babies can actually release urine though, not through the umbilical cord, but that's just usually absorbed by the mother. Third trimester, so now you really are starting to show if you weren't before. And that's why a lot of pregnant people, they seem to get super pregnant in the last couple of months of pregnancy because that's when they really are showing. You can't hide it anymore. Fetus responds more strongly to light and sound outside of the uterus. Fetus has periods of daydreaming or dreaming. Eyes are open when awake and closed when asleep. They have little hairs all over their body. So like if you look at your arm, you probably have hair on your arm. That started when you were just in the womb still. Bones are growing and hardening. Synapses between neurons form in huge numbers. So this is, all throughout pregnancy, it's really crucial. And even though it seems silly, like when the baby inside the womb is constantly hearing the mother's voice, that's one way you can comfort a baby. So if you're the mom or the dad, especially the mom, because that baby is always going to hear the mom talking, it starts to recognize her voice, and it's actually a really comforting sound to it once that baby is born, when the mother is talking, or the father. Once complete development, fetus turns to a head down position, so the baby will actually kind of like invert, and then if the baby doesn't invert, it's called a breached birth, and they usually have to do a C-section, or they have to have a DO come in and try to manipulate the baby to be like upside down or inverted because it can't be born legs first because that causes problems. After about 38 weeks, so about 9 months, the fetus is ready to be born. The mother affects the fetus, and pregnancy affects the mother, like hugely. The fetus depends on the mother for all its nutrition. Mother's diet must support fetal health. Mother must avoid toxic chemicals. Some moms even avoid coffee altogether because there's caffeine in it, and caffeine in high amounts can really affect the baby in a negative way. However, if you just have like a cup of coffee a day, or even really 2 cups, that's not going to really affect the baby at all. It's when you have like really high amounts of caffeine, which is why you're also not supposed to drink any alcohol if you're pregnant, or do any drugs, obviously, because that can really mess up a baby as well, developmentally. Mother's health is affected by pregnancy in a number of ways, so she has to eat more, obviously, because she's also providing for the baby. So increase in calories and body weight, obviously, because she's putting on weight to help support the baby, and the baby's putting weight on her. Pregnancy hormones affecting homeostasis. Regular medical checkups are needed. All right, last section here, 34.4. Physical development continues through adolescence and declines with age. So now we're talking about the development of the fetus after it is born. Okay, birth occurs in 3 stages. So the first stage 1 of birth, is the dilation of the cervix. Anytime you hear dilation, like your pupils dilate, basically it's something that's expanding or becoming bigger. So if your pupils dilate when it gets dark, that means your pupils are becoming bigger, right? So dilation of the cervix is basically that little part in between the uterus and the vagina. So this is the vagina tube right here. This is the uterus. This is the baby, obviously. This little thing right here is called the cervix, and it actually kind of looks like a little donut, and that donut will actually expand when it's time for labor. Contractions push the cervix open. That cervix is like really tiny, like it barely even has a little hole in it, like when you are not pregnant, or even like most of the stages throughout pregnancy until you're about to have the baby. It's like you can't even see like a little hole in that little donut. But for pregnancy, it has to be dilated about 10 centimeters, which sounds huge, which is crazy because it has to fit that baby's dome through. If the cervix dilates too little, a C-section is done. So sometimes there's problems where the cervix won't actually dilate enough and they'll have to perform a C-section. Contractions will also help turn that baby upside down, so its head is what comes out first. Stage 2 is the emergence of the baby. Baby is usually born head first. Oxytocin stimulates milk production, and then the baby is produced through the cervix and out of the vaginal canal. That's still a pretty small space for a baby's huge dome. So sometimes the baby can actually get like those like harsh red marks on its face. Have you ever seen a brand newborn baby? That's usually what that's from, but that'll go away over time. Stage 3, this is called the afterbirth. This is the expulsion of the placenta. So obviously you don't need that placenta anymore. Placenta detaches from the uterine wall, and contractions help control bleeding. Human growth and aging, genetics, hormones, lifestyle, environment all affect these stages. So during infancy, growth is rapid. If you've ever had a puppy, obviously they don't stay a puppy for very long, right? They grow so fast, even more so than little kids do because they have a shorter lifespan. But you all know how fast puppies grow up, and parents would say how fast kids grow up as well. During infancy, growth is rapid. During childhood, motor and language skills develop. Genetics, hormones, lifestyle, environment affect all stages. So during puberty, sexual maturity begins. During adolescence, growth is rapid in the brain, rewired. Adulthood marks the peak of skills and independence. Aging is also affected by genetics, hormones, lifestyle, environment. Okay, kind of said all that already. Effects of aging can be reduced with good diet, exercise, and continued learning. So your brain is very similar to a muscle. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. This is a photo sequence of Jerry Peel at age 1.5, age 17, and 71. You can still see like he's still the same person, which is kind of cool. Okay, that is the end of chapter 34. Now, like I said, I feel like kids are always super awkwarded out to ask questions regarding this, but a lot of this stuff is like really important and super fascinating, and especially at like an early stage of development, like if you've gone through puberty, just going through puberty, in the middle of puberty, whatever, or even all throughout like life later on. If you have questions about certain things, like obviously you should ask your doctor just to make sure. But yeah, or if you have questions about, you're like, this is really awkward, but I don't understand. Like, I think someone had asked me one time, they're like, so do babies like poop in the womb? Like, that's a valid question. Good question. And there's the things like you should know and you should learn about and you should be curious about because like it's important. So if you have questions like that, don't be awkwarded out. Like you can ask your doctor, or if you're just curious, even if it's like not a question about your gender, and you're like, because if you're a dude asking about a baby, like do babies poop? I feel like that's something that's a valid question. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. That's fine. You can email me. But yeah, this is just such a cool like science background of how this all works, and I think it's really important to know. I think you probably got a little bit of this in 7th grade. It's always way more awkward in 7th grade. I just got done doing the video for my 7th graders, and they're probably all giggling at home, but that's okay. But I feel like as you get into high school, and if you take biology classes in college, it just becomes way more fascinating because you realize how many little teeny tiny things have to all work together, and the chances of a life even forming is just so crazy. Like if you really think about it, it's insane. But that brings us to the end of that, so I'm going to end this video because I know it's already been kind of long.